Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. We review anything and everything. And today, this is a big deal for the channel. Why? Because it is my first UCS Ultimate Collector Series Star Wars set. Well, I think the UCS is only for Star Wars. So it is my first UCS and UCS Star Wars set, if that makes sense. But now, the closest thing I ever had to this scale was the Tudor Corner modular set, which in my mind is considered to be the Lego Cities UCS version, if you want to call it that. But definitely, this is my official Lego UCS set of, as far as my first one I'm ever purchasing. This is set 75409, 18 plus. There's 2,970 pieces. This is Jango Fett's Starship, aka Jango Fett's Slave One. Obviously a major character in the Star Wars franchise, where you started with Boba Fett and everyone loved Boba Fett. Then you found out he was actually descended from Jango Fett. And then it made it even just gave so much more lore to the character. And he became, I would say, essentially the same coolness that was on Boba Fett, then rubbed over onto Jango Fett. Going over the box, we have, this shows the side display here, and here is the back display here. It comes with a stand, because this is one of those ships that you definitely have to have a stand. Some ships don't have stands, but this one definitely needs a stand because of the way its orientation is. Now, there was a Boba Fett UCS ship. I think it came out maybe almost 10 years ago, 2015 or something of that sort, 2014, 2015. This is definitely built on the same bones, but just a little bit different and ultimately more modernized. And obviously for the time. And one thing that's interesting too is I found out that his cockpit never was supposed to rotate, and I didn't know that. It was just internally somewhere in this section where he would have a secondary, I think, sitting area, along with where he would house his prisoners that he would have. That would rotate. But as far as in canon, it's not supposed to rotate in the cockpit area. I never knew that. So, you guys could throw in the comments whether that's true or not, or whatever the case is. I don't ever remember paying attention to that into the movies. Here you could see here the layout of it here, and the opening, and them coming off of the ramp. Jango, that's Boba, and that's Jango. And here's a scene from the movie. And there goes them inside the cockpit in the rear. So I am going to change the orientation of this video. I just had to do that to get everything in scale, so you could first just see the way the box looks. But I'm going to change the orientation just for the purpose of being able to unbox this, because I know UCS unboxings are an experience in of their own. Okay, so we are back in the correct orientation to unbox this. Do not mind my little background of my plant and the fish tank in the background, which is obviously always there. But this, I have to have a super wide angle for this because this is a lot to handle. So we're gonna whip into it from this angle here. Now, I know normally when it comes to these unboxing experiences, there's a whole lot going on, and I just want to be able to enjoy and capture that, because there's my Lego roses in the background, so you already know. Definitely a fan of Lego. So this is interesting. And I say that to say, now this set goes for, and I'm going to have the link in the description for when it is available. Link's going to be for Amazon. But some sets, UCS sets, will have boxes in it. I don't know if this is because it is a set that is retails for $300 versus some of the other sets that might be a bit more expensive, or if it's just their new kind of thing of trying to save on boxes and whatnot. But normally you would have several smaller boxes, like in the AT-AT, I think it was in the Millennium Falcon, and it was in the Razor Crest, which were all 600 plus price tag UCSs. So I don't know if that's why they do the unboxing experience different. This right here is for the cockpit, which I'm not gonna unbox now. I'm gonna wait so it doesn't get any scratches. You have a bunch of bags here. I am actually not going to count up all the bags here because it's crazy. Right here, so far it's 21. So it's probably somewhere in that range of 21 bags. But I will confirm later on when we start the review. It looks like it's probably 21 bags. All right, I'm already seeing 23. So I'm just gonna pause real quick, clear off the table, and then I'm gonna open up the instructions because sometimes that shows certain details and I wanna see if that part still is the same experience that usually goes with UCS unboxings, which is, like I said, normally they have several smaller boxes inside. This one doesn't have it, probably because of its size, maybe because of the budget, I'm not too sure. But let's see if the instructions have all the extra detail. Okay, so I kept a couple of the bags 1 to 4 on the side because when you're gonna get started on your build, you wanna have a couple of bags ready. At least that's how I do it on the side, the initial ones and the other ones I put back in the box. So let's see here. What's interesting too is the floral set, which is not gonna be UCS either, but my rose set, which had almost a UCS feel in terms of the way the box looked and whatnot, had also had little tidbits in the book as far as just you know, creator notes and things of that sort. So that was interesting. But this is the official, my first official. And there's two. There's one and there's two. Let's change this angle up a little bit. There we go. Now let's just see if it has that. And so far it looks like it does. So this is gonna be interesting. This is gonna actually make it end up taking so much longer for me to build, but I am a fan of, you know, reading through all this stuff. And what's interesting too is of all the regular, we'll say fighter ships in Star Wars, that is my favorite. And that one right there, you see Obi-Wan in it with his little droid. That is still available. I'm going to put the link in the description for that. It goes for $23 on Amazon right now. That set was, I heard rumors that it was supposed to be discontinued like last year, but then when it was rumored that this set was going to come out, they kept it along because the two go hand in hand and scale wise should fit almost perfectly together. I recently rewatched that scene also. So definitely grab that. If you have this set, grab it. A lot of interesting stuff here. So I'm definitely going to enjoy reading through all of that before you even get to the actual build. Yeah, very interesting. I'm learning cockpit ramp with a slight push, pull, and blah, blah. Gives you a little bit of instructions on some of the things that they have going on here. So it's really nice. And then you get into the build, and the first thing you do is build Jango, which he's going to have a lot of detail on him because all the UCS characters always have more detail than what they would have regularly, as far as just like a regular set. And what's interesting is his hairpiece is the exact same type, and this is fitting, as I just did a review on the gift with purchase, which is the clones, the training clones on Camino. I'm always butchering that with calling them the Camina. I'm not even going to try right now. Kaminoans or whatever. But anyway, so he's got the same hairstyle as those, which is fitting because they're all clones, but they give him a little bit more of a scruffy face. So yes, this is going to be interesting and fun to read through. Now this one doesn't have any more additional stuff to it. It goes straight into the build, but this is definitely going to be fun. Like I said, it is my first UCS set. And when we return, I will have everything fully built, and we're going to jump right into the full discussion and review of this set. All right, everybody, we are back. And first, I want to say that it took me forever to build this. I don't know how so many people build this so quick. Me trying to find the time, I felt like it took me, this has 23 bags in it. I felt like it took me probably almost an hour each bag. So I don't know. I'm just, I guess, not a fast builder, but so just bear with the fact that this set is so big. I had to have a wide angle to get everything into frame because it is just too big, and I'll try to work with the best that I can with switching up camera angles and whatnot, and at some point laying the ship down in its landing mode and kind of just getting an overhead so that way we can kind of really get into some of the details. But as far as the build process went, it didn't seem tricky. Nothing felt too hard. Some panels that you had to put on, like say the bottom area, at some point got a little bit tough to squeeze in, but for the most part, it wasn't really that big of an issue. So the build process was actually pretty good. And reading through the details inside the book, that was actually pretty cool as well. I kind of flipped through some of those pages a little bit earlier inside the video. But that was cool. It gave you that UCS feel of where, you know, you have some of the details referencing the movies and whatnot, and some of the scenes of the movie. So that was actually pretty cool. We have the figures over here that we're going to get into later on. So I'll zoom in on them at a later point. And on the left is a bag of the extra pieces. But the truth is that actually there's more pieces there than what would normally be because I actually did a little bit of modifications to the build. So first I want to get into the ship design. And so this video is going to be long. It's going to be a bit of rambling. Do not mind. But I do want to get a little bit into the ship design. So when it comes to the ship design, what I've found interesting about the Slave One for the longest is I will look at different references in terms of, I looked at images or video clip of when it was in the original trilogy, the size of it versus when you look at it in the prequels, when you look at it in regards to other kind of details inside books that show like more of interior scale, be almost like a half screen, if you want to call it that, where it's like partially of the exterior with some of the interior. And one thing I've always noticed was that this ship, I never could pinpoint the size originally. And then what made it even more so distracting or kind of thrown off when it came to that scale and size was once this thing was in the Mandalorian show in the Book of Boba Fett, you saw the interior now, which you never seen before, and how big that interior was. And then that gave you another sense of the scale and scope. And so this ship, I felt like based on some media and whatnot, it could almost pass for being a lot smaller of a ship. And there are some Lego sets that depict this as being smaller. Obviously, UCS scale is meant to be like actual scale in relation to minifigures, so minifig scale. As if the minifigs was the size of a human, even though minifigs don't have human proportions, but you get the idea. But it was always a thing where the Slave One could be either pretty small in its scale size, because like I said, if you look at the scene from the original trilogy and you see Boba Fett walking Han Solo's body frozen in carbonite into the ship, it doesn't look that huge. The ship doesn't look that huge. But then when you look at a couple of other shots, well, I won't even say necessarily the shots, because even the shots when you see him in the prequel, it doesn't look super huge, because even from that angle, when it's on the deck, you know, where it's taken off from Camino, and you have you know, that scene where he's fighting Obi-Wan, and even then, it doesn't look super huge necessarily. You see him walking up into the ship afterwards. It doesn't look super huge. It looks like a decent size scale, but it doesn't look super huge. But then when you look at some renderings or drawings, because I have a clip and I'm going to insert that here. And you could see, based on the drawing, the illustration, how massive the interior of the ship looks. And at that scale, it doesn't even look like that the pilot seat area that you see like there is not even within scale to like, and I'm not saying necessarily this model, I just mean in general, when you look at, say, even the prequel movie. Now, some of the images, I'm going to also post up an image of the one I posted up just a moment ago was Boba Fett's one. I'm going to post up of the Jango Fett one now. And even then, when you see the movie, the prequel, I'm sorry, where he's sitting inside the seat and he's chasing Obi-Wan and Boba's right next to him, it feels like similar to the way you see it here, where the cockpit, the seat are taking up the entire windshield in terms of space. But then when you look at some of these illustrations, it looks like the cockpit area is a full-size huge deck inside a pretty massive ship. It doesn't look like it's just a simple cockpit seat that you're sitting in. It feels like a bridge almost like, and it's like a spaceship bridge, and it feels like there's so much more room and so much more space. So like, this is a ship that I feel like the scales are all over the place in different medias and whatnot. And so it's definitely one of those ships where I think it gets very interesting and funny to kind of play around with, like, how big the ship is or should be, or whatever the case is. So as far as, and I say all that to say that when it comes to, if this thing is done well in terms of scale, I think it's a nice job that they done. But I also feel that it's just a very weird ship when it comes to that, because like I said, you see some depictions where it could be a lot smaller and some where it's a lot bigger. And based on the photos that I just showed you, all the workings that would be going inside here, I'll take Jango Fett here, for example, you see his scale, all the workings that would be going inside here would be so much more going on. It's very weird. But then when I look at the image, I'm looking at it right now, it's like you don't have like the proportions from the circular part to here doesn't look like it's that far of a distance, but yet they cram so much stuff inside there. So it's just interesting. And then also in that same photo of, I'm looking at the one from Boba Fett's ship and not Jango Fett's ship. You see the men at the back of the image of that picture. And so you see their scale, and so it doesn't look like they are far-fetched from the scale. Like, they look like regular size versus the ship, but it's almost like they just cram a bunch of things inside the ship. And maybe that's what it is. Maybe the ship is just jam-packed and crammed with things in it that are smaller size, like the bedding and this and that, whatever the case is. But it's definitely interesting. And you see there's a lot of changes between Jango Fett's and Boba Fett's ship, because Jango Fett has a bed in the back behind this cockpit area, and then Boba Fett's bed area would be in the lower area here, if you basing on the two photos that I showed you. Once again, sorry about the rant. This is going to be a long video, but I find the ship very interesting. I always have, in terms of just the way that it's done and everything like that. And then even doing further research on the whole rotation thing. And I had mentioned earlier inside the video about the parts that rotate, that the cockpit and the, we'll just call them, but Jango's Slave One did not rotate, and in Boba's, I see different media that says it did, that he added the ability for it to rotate, and then also that it didn't. But so I'm not sure what's 100%, but one thing I have gathered is that the seats that go below do rotate, and those are the ones just like you see inside the Mandalorian show, where the lower set of seats rotates. And I'm going to put a clip that I got offline here. And that clip will show you how this clip shows you the orientation of how that rotation works, where the top sitting area doesn't rotate, the main cockpit area, and then the lower seating area does rotate, and that's also where you would hold the prisoners. But in that depiction, he has regular seats inside there, and so the one, just like how it was on the Mandalorian show, it was multiple seats sitting in there, and those seats would be the area where, even though people were just sitting there, I guess that's where you would also have prisoners chained up, maybe sitting in a seat. And so since they won't fall out of their place and they can't move around, if they have chains like handcuffs in their hands and they're, latched onto the seat, safety belts, or whatever the case is, their whole station will stay in one orientation because it moves, which makes sense. But then on Boba Fett's Slave One, there are bunks in the back area. If you go back to that photo that I showed, there are bunks in like the back half area coming back down this way if the ship was in landing mode. And you see them in that kind of image that I showed you. It's like a half screen where you kind of see inside it. And so on one side of that image, the far side going that side, you see the bunks. And on this side, you see one bunk, but maybe that's just because, so you can see through it. They don't want to show all the bunks coming upwards because then you won't be able to see through it. So maybe it's, of the way the picture shows it, like 3 bunks on that side, on the other side of the ship. And on this side of the ship, it's 1 bunk, which really could be 3 more, but it's just like they're not showing them all because they want you to be able to see through what's on the other side. My point is that he carries his prisoners differently as they lay down. And in that part, it's not a rotating area. He still has the seat area where the people would sit underneath, but it's different. And I don't even know if that area rotates. Well, it does, because based on the Mandalorian show, it does. So it does rotate, but he's not using it for prisoners. I was going to say if it changed from Jango's to Boba's, but seeing it in the Mandalorian, the rotation feature was there. So, and from my understanding, that rotation feature is there in Jango Fett's as well. So I don't know. But anyway, so I just wanted to kind of really get into that, about that differences. The reason why also I wanted to point that out is because I have done modifications on that lower area. And so my ship is going to be a little different. But first, I just want to say real quickly in regards to the ship design, one thing I forgot to mention, it was that just in terms of just the interest of his designer ship, the Slave One is one of the most unique ships that you will find in the Star Wars mythos completely, or even in any kind of, media, because it's, one, it's got a strange shape. 2, I don't know what made them think to make a ship that has to do all this, going from one orientation to another, because it's so over the top, but yet then it implements this whole, you having to do this whole rotation thing, or sitting in the seats where you're facing the ceiling until the ship finally gets moving. It's very interesting, but I don't think you'll ever find a ship that unique ever again. A lot of ships may have some unique of a look to them in Star Wars, but this has a uniqueness in its function as well, which really makes it over the top, and it just very much stands out. I feel like it is definitely the yin to the Millennium Falcon's yang in so many ways, not only because, it's like the most standout, like, I don't want to call it hero ship, but you could call that for lack of a better name. But normally I use that word hero ships for the hero characters and like their independent ships, like, the Mandalorian, Din or Han Solo. But in this case, we'll give it that same title. So an individual's hero ship, this is the bad guy comparison to what the good guy comparison the Millennium Falcon was. And how Han Solo and Han Solo and Boba Fett were to some degree enemies. They knew of each other, you know, obviously because the first thing Han Solo was like, Boba Fett, where's Boba Fett? You know, it's like they know of each other. So this became like that kind of his secret enemy in the background, you know, like his past enemy that maybe he dealt with. He's not at the forefront, but when he does show his face, he's the guy that everyone is like, oh my God, who's this Boba Fett guy? So I say that to say that this ship is definitely unique in that aspect, and it has a design language to it that's so unique. So now I'm just going to jump into some of these external details real quick, and then we're going to go into some of the internal details real quick. And as I said before, I'm sorry that the length of the video. What I'm going to do probably now is change up the angle so we can see it from a different perspective. Okay, so I have used the bag for the books that it came in, so it'll be easier for me to rotate this while we go over it. But first, I want to just show you, I'm not going to go in detail with the stand and all that, but just want to show you the plaque real quick, and you can read that information on it, saying the manufacturer, you know, the actual size, the length. The 21.5 meters roughly equates to about 70 to 75 feet long. And it does equate to that in scale, because if you count up the studs, and a stud is the equivalent of 1 foot long if you go by minifigure size, because a minifigure is the length of roughly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It should be 6. Let me count those. Yep. Roughly about in between like 5 and 6 studs, which would depict, you know, a person standing somewhere about 5 and some change to 6 feet tall as the average height. So that brings into play that each stud should be a foot long. If you count up the length of studs, you roughly get into that 70, 75, almost 80-ish range from this tip here to this tip here. So it does fall within that scale. But obviously minifigures are not proportioned as regular humans. So now, first thing I'm going to jump into is just some of these external features real quick. So here we have, obviously you've seen the rotating wings from when I had it lifted up to its position now. And I like the details that they did on this. And let's try to zoom in a little bit more for you. As far as that goes, you've got the little guns on the side here. And even though these, if I'm not mistaken, are supposed to be able to be retractable, obviously it wasn't really practical to be able to do that on this set. So, and I'm okay with that because I don't want a set wasting a lot of internal mechanics to make certain things function that, you know, end up just taking up too much interior space if something was actually able to utilize that interior space, whatever the case is. In this case, you got structure underneath here. Now, you also have the rotating guns, which is fine as well. Some of this extra detailing as well here. Once I have a chance later on going through some of the extra pieces, I might end up adding some extra greebling here with just some of the extra pieces, because I like to just use the extra pieces rather than having them to go to waste. And I don't usually throw extra pieces into a bin just for the purpose of just throwing them there. But that's just me. Now this piece right here is not a feature, but it's just part of how it is, and it comes down like that. But the thing about it is I could see somebody easily working that to, if they wanted to put something in there or some kind of modification, because normally there would be missiles that would be held up on the sides here. So this is a way for a person to kind of really play around with that if they wanted to. And also, I just wanted to show here that feature where you have this. Let me pull it back a little bit. You press down on the ramp for it to go down, and then you press this for it to go back up. And so if you wanted with those little studs there, you could, I'm going to use Boba for this. It's just a little easier, even though Jango completely works, but I don't want one of his guns to drop or anything like that. But you could have him walking out of the ramp, which looks fine. Also, while I have the camera off the stand, I am going to come here and show you the cockpit area. Let me take this off. This is not always easy to grab, but luckily they don't make it tight on there with a lot of tension. So here is the cockpit area. And you can see this thing pulls out. We're going to get into my mods in a few, which you can see over there. This right here comes out. And that's where Jango could store his guns. And he's got a little back to tank there, which I don't know if that's supposed to be a micro version of the big tank he would be inside, or if it's just smaller ones that you can, like, you know, take the chemicals that are in the back to tank and just rub it on your face like a lotion. I don't know how that goes. So if it's just like a micro version of what's supposed to be a bigger scale. Now this right here is his cockpit area, which I think is designed very well. And the fact that it didn't have to rotate, because in canon it doesn't rotate in Jango's ship, actually makes it better, because the work that would have been needed to make this thing rotate would have meant you had less interior space for other things. So I think it's really nice. It did use stickers. A lot of people are upset about that. To me, it's not that big of a deal. It's not the end of the world. But at the same time, I understand. UCS set, sometimes you want prints. But it's nice. You can hold 3 guys there. And the details match up with the movie, with that little thing that he has on there and the screen images on there and whatnot, the asteroid field over there. So that's pretty cool. And this is very easily, you can customize it if you wanted to add more things on it, with just like some of these little studs here and just adding other mechanics that you want to add to it. So I think that part is really cool. So another thing I'm going to get into now is showing the interior now that I added the modifications. So I'm going to show you what was originally supposed to be there. So this right here is what's originally supposed to be there. Obviously it doesn't have the seat backings on there yet in that diagram, but that's supposed to be inside there. And that, where you see the front of this here, is supposed to be facing upwards towards the windscreen. So that's what would normally be there. And if you look at, say, even the video clip that I inserted earlier, where it shows the rotation mechanism, that lower area looks very similar to this, where it's got, like, you know, these kind of pillar things in the back that give it support that clip onto the top seating area that Jango seats at, and this whole area would have the 2 seats, or, you know, in the Boba's rendition would be, you know, the multiple seats, I think, like in the Mandalorian show. But the point is, this was secondary seat area. The thing about it is that if you go back to the photo clip that I had showed, as far as where I said you had the beds for Boba Fett's seating area, and I don't know if Jango Fett's ship changed from that time to when it became Boba Fett's, but like I said, in Boba Fett's ship, you saw it had the bunks, and the bunks would be to hold prisoners. They lay them down. It's almost like the equivalent of at a morgue, like where you'd have where you lay the bodies in. That's essentially what his holding area is supposed to be like. You slide the bodies into this kind of sleeping area. They're chained up. I don't know if they're, obviously if they're frozen in carbonite, then they're just going to be, you know, obviously unconscious. But if they are conscious, because he can hold them when they're not frozen in carbonite, then in that case, it's just them laying in a bed, probably shackled to the bed until he gets to his destination. So what I have done here is made a combination of the seating area plus the bunk area. Now, one thing I'm going to also do is at the end of the video, I'm going to insert a clip in regards to how I came about this modification, along with some other ideas that I was trying to implement that didn't work. But I'm going to show you that process about how I tried to get a reinforced, like a beam down there, across. It would have been inside there, but around this top area, like around this section, but down in here. Let me try to spin this down here, and it would have been the support so I could have more clearance. But unfortunately it didn't work, because I'm going to show you in a later video, also at the end of this whole review, that that beam area that I made a beam, support beam that went across, is not leveled, because this whole angle that they come up with is made in a way where a lot of these bricks internally are not leveled, where you can just layer things on top of each other. They're slanted, but because the support beams of the Technic, beams are holding the structure, certain things are not reliant on your typical Lego stacking method, because they're connected by means of things that are, not, some things are bent. So you'll see it in the video, at the end clip, if you choose to watch that. But anyway, so what I did here is, let me make sure I got enough lighting here. Two things. One, this is that area, and I made it where it could be removed. Now, all the pieces that made up the sitting area gave me all the pieces I needed to implement this here. So one thing else I'm going to do, where's my Boba? Because he's the easiest, since he's small, easiest for me to sit and stuff like that. I have a floating seat right here. Now this seat is to try to implement, like I said, this is a prisoner holding area with the bunks, storage area, which you see, and I'll get a closer view of in a few, where I have some storage canisters there, and the floating seat area. So it's trying to combine all those areas in one. So here I could put Boba and anyone else who would be sitting in that sitting area there, and that's how he would be, or anyone who would be sitting. And then you have the windscreen on top, and he'd be sitting there, simulating those seats that I took out. I don't have to keep this here because it comes out very easily. So it's one of those things where if I don't want it, I literally could just pull it right out, and it's not a problem. And that is that little mechanism right there. And the only pieces that I added to this, other than the pieces that already came with the set from extra pieces, or the pieces that went to that seating area, were this 2x8, this 2x8 plate, the top one and the bottom one, which if you don't want to use those or use outside pieces, you can make a single bunk there with the pieces that come with it. But I wanted to do a double bunk, and I'll tell you where that idea came from. And then this black seat here, which everyone has plenty of regular seats, and I threw that on there. This whole framing right here is from part of the set. Now I'm also going to throw a photo clip in here, which shows that I had support beams on the side here, and those support beams, because I didn't know if I was going to need them or not structurally, I left them in, and I built this area around those, which is why I did the tiling, the smoother tiling here and here on the sides, as opposed to utilizing that area to build in. And I just kind of build within that area of 6 studs wide because of that. But I took those out after the fact. I could add them. Like I said, I just showed you that clip that shows when they were in place, and I may leave them in there just for the fact that they give that sense of like greeveling on the walls or whatever the case is. But I really don't know if I'm going to want to do that or not. But like I said, it's very customizable. Now, as I mentioned before, that the bunks was something that is in the design for where they hold the prisoners for Boba's version of the Slave One. But the reason why I already had that idea on hand is because if anyone remembers when I had did a video on modifying my, what do you call it again? Star Destroyer. I was trying to throw bunks inside there, and I already had these made up. Now, even though in the photo you see that Boba Fett's sitting area, his bunk area, has more of this color, because everything in Star Wars uses this color, this kind of tan, beige color, whatever you want to call it, for beds. Only reason why I didn't want to use that is because these were the pieces that came with the set, and I like using all the pieces that come with the set rather than using pieces that don't come with the set. So that way, if anyone else wants to do the same, they can, and they don't have to say, well, I had to get a bunch of random pieces from different sets. The only thing I've added to this set, like I said, was those 2x8 plates, 2 of them, and just a regular chair. So with that being said, take my makeshift Dash Rendar figure and put him on the bunk. He is a prisoner, and you can slide that right there and it fits without a problem. And those little jumper tiles that I put on there makes it come on easy, on, off and on very easy. And those, like I said, already come with the set, so it's easy for you to do that. Obviously, I added the cargo there, which you see, and that wasn't hard to place because those jumper studs also come with the set, and so I put them back there. Now that back piece is not as reinforced, and what I was mentioning before is that right below, I get something to point with really quick, right below this piece right here, hold on. So right below that piece here, like this whole plate here is something also comes with it. And you're going to see that, like I said, in the video at the end that I add showing how I did that. The problem was I was going to reinforce this by building upwards, because right below it, I was able to put a beam that went across. But like I mentioned before, because that beam is not leveled with this same area, you can't build upwards because that beam becomes on tilt if you put a beam between there. So I had to just reinforce this by adding more, like how I put this smooth plate here, this beam here. It's trying to hold this plate here to attach it to this side, so that way it's just kind of bearing the weight, because this piece ends right where you see that brick there, that little 1x2 plate area, and that line right there, that's where the support ends as far as the weight bearing part. These last 3 studs are just floating. So that's why I don't like to put a lot of pressure past that point. So that's why I put the jumper studs there. So if I want to put crates, I can by just lightly pressing on there. But when I press on that end, I can press on the opposite end here while I press on there. So that way to counter that balance of weight. And then also too, obviously now you can see through to the other side. And it gives you just a bit more interior space, because normally this entire area here would not have even been utilized, because what would happen is that seating area facing up this way would have created a wall that would have stopped probably like about here. So you gain an extra 3 studs worth of interior space going that way, which I think is cool. And in addition, another thing that I was able to create with the extra pieces that I may keep in it, maybe I won't, I gotta decide, is a little workbench. If I want to have that in there, it still would fit underneath the floating seat, but you know, maybe I won't want to have the floating seat while I have this in there. But you see that right there, little workbench. So maybe when Jango is parked, he could be working on his little bench and his little workbench there. And what you see, he's got a pistol he's working on, his extra pistol in case his other ones break. He's got a backup pistol and some little heating device. I pretend that, you know, he uses that to kind of weld his gun and get it shaped right. So you can see that there. Like I said, that doesn't have any bearing on me putting the prisoner bunks in there. And he still has room to kind of, I'll take his guns out of his hand, walk around or whatever the case is. You could even build a spot to hold his helmet if you wanted to. Obviously you could take out the the cargo things, because he doesn't always have to have cargo in there. It just gives him a space to walk around. Now, like I said, I had those side pieces here before, but after the fact, once I realized that I didn't need those, if I want, I can move this over, but then I would have to kind of readjust where I have those jumper plates, and I could move things over if I wanted to, but still something I was contemplating, or something I was thinking about that you could do down the line if you guys follow this same suit, is you could, instead of having those smooth plates on the side there, you can replace those, so you can put these on the side just for decoration and make it look like you've got pipes and things, or whatever the case is. But anyway, so that is that. And here we kind of reenact that scene, except instead of Han Solo, Jango is pushing, in this case, my Dash Rendar. On the bunks, you could assume, even though I know the bunks would normally be stationary, we could, you know, just for play wise, pretend that, you know, it comes out and it floats and is able to like roll upwards into his into the ship. And this is just a quick image where everything is clumped in there, where I have, like I said, the floating seat, the bunks, the storage in the back, and I kept his little bench workshop in there if I want to, even though it makes it a little cramped, but it still fits. Okay, now just jumping into the minifigures really quickly. Boba. Now, a lot of people felt very controversial about this Boba figure. To be honest, I really don't care. It's a minifigure, it's a Lego figure. I'm not one of those people who, you know, they have to be exactly like whatever. He represents him. He's not even the main guy, so it's like it doesn't matter that much to me, but that's just me. He works well enough for Boba, and that's fine. Obviously, the pistols for Jango, which these have been used plenty of times for many different things, and they work here for his blasters as well. And I think it's so interesting that each main Mandalorian figure has different standout weapons that they use. Obviously, Jango uses the twin blasters, almost like a cowboy. Boba Fett uses some kind of longer, I wouldn't call it a rifle, but it's you know, a bigger type of style gun that's really distinct to him, which in Lego form they really built it up to be that. And then obviously Din Djarin has his guns that specifically fit him, especially his long rifle that you build out and whatever the case is. So yes, things that are very fitting to them, so I think that's interesting. Here you can see with Jango, he's got the new revised visor, overhead visor that comes over. So I didn't have a problem with the old one. New one is a little bit better. That's fine. I really like the details on the figure, the arm printing, the colors, everything. Here you can see his face, and he's got his 5 o'clock shadow, some scars, so it really gives him a little bit more character to stand out versus, like, say, just a clone figure. And I think that's cool. Let's see, he's got back printing. Oh, and actually, let me just show that this back piece here, how it holds all his stuff, because his backpack fits on there as so, and his blasters fit on here like so. So when he puts that away into the back, that holds all his stuff. Now the backpack is not on there super well, but when you put it in place, it will stay, because it's not going to be able to fall up out, because just the way the way it's situated. But obviously when you just have it leaning over like that, it will fall out. So my final thoughts on the ship is, I'm gonna look look at them in their seats, is I think is a great design. I think with such a weird, complicated ship for its scaling, like I said, because some depictions show it seeming larger than what it is on the inside while being on the outside relatively small. It's very weird, but with that, I think they did a pretty good job. My only thing I would say, just in general, I won't say there's a critique of the set, it's just my thoughts when it comes to Lego in general and putting together some of these ships, is that I know that when you have such a big ship like this, you need a lot of interior structure to keep things from, you know, from not falling to pieces or whatever the case is. But the thing about it is, to me, I love, and this is part of the reason why I really enjoy play scale, is I love when you squeeze in a lot of interior space inside the ships. And this is one of those ships where, even though it's funny with its scaling to have interior space, because like I said, in general, outside of the Lego realm, this ship sometimes looks small from the outside, and then you'll see depictions of the inside looking massive. You know, when you look at the outside of it, even in the movie form, even in the TV form, you would never think that the inside of it will be able to house what you saw in the Mandalorian show, where you had the big rotating sitting area. You'd be like, I can't imagine that fits in there. You know, especially when you see that original depiction of the Slave One in the original trilogy, you would never guess that you have a huge rotating area like that and other storage areas all in it. But with that being said, I know they need structural integrity to hold the UCS ships together because they're so big. At the same time, I really am a fan of interior space, and this is not a critique of the set, or because with Lego's limitations as well, I'm not knocking them, but I do wish that they would focus more on interior space and focusing on that. Now, granted, I know these are more for display than they are for play. That's probably the mindset that they have for them. But for me, I love playing around with things, even just on the level of, you know, you have it on your table, you're posing, you're looking in the inside, you're just fascinated by the inside like you would with a model of something, and being able to see the interior. So I was happy I was able to customize and add that a little bit more to the interior. But I do think they could have gotten away with not necessarily changing anything on this, but still getting away with making an interior flat beam that goes from all the way where you saw I ended up coming all the way down the inside up until where the boarding ramp at least opens, and you know, maybe even filling that with a few things, even if it couldn't be touched very easily. But still, not saying a critique of the set, but just saying that I just like interior design when it comes to these ships. But overall, I think this ship is really great. $300 is a hefty price. I know that you're getting a magnificent ship, and it is actually one of the more affordable of the UCS sets. So in that regards, I think it's a good buy, but it definitely still is pricey at $300. Okay, so one thing I forgot to mention was the seismic charge on the back of the set. So this piece right here, you have these two doors. I'm gonna zoom in, and essentially they click on. So there's no kind of mechanism to make them slide over. But at the same time, if you would have done that, you would have had to deal with more internal mechanics that would have gotten in the way of something else. So I don't mind as far as this goes, but both of these open, and then obviously you can close them as such and press down on them and they will close. And the seismic charge, which is actually not very easy to get in there, but they give you this here flap to bring down for the purpose of if something drops in between there. What's also decent about this here, about this flap dropping down, is I'm sure, well, because of that, if you want to throw storage things just right in there, yes, they'll be rattling, but you can still just kind of throw them in the back, close up the door, and then obviously if anything was stuck in there, you would just open this up to get it out. But the seismic charge is actually not that easy to get out. This is my first time trying to pull it out since putting it in, and it's not easy to get out, but it looks nice. It required a few stickers. Now, to be honest with you, You could easily take this and it wasn't easy making sure that these things lined up. You could do this without the stickers, and I think it would still look just as good as the seismic charge. So if you're not a fan of stickers, I really think you can get away with just not putting stickers on it, and it would just look like gray with the shape. And I really think that that wouldn't be a problem at all. A lot of people are upset that they didn't print this. I get it to a degree, but then I also understand that they probably would have never used this print for anything else ever again, except for if they made a play scale version of this set, or maybe even a newer playscale version of the Boba Fett Slave One. Other than that, that's really about it. And so you can see the studs back there, and they pretty much just click right into that middle stud. And it's really not easy to just kind of get it in there. Right now I have this back door area open, which allows me to kind of get a little bit of angle. Otherwise, without that, that would be tough. And you can kind of see the profile. Let me zoom out of this back area here. And this is where the stand locks into. So if I lift it up here, you could see these black areas here. And it essentially just goes right underneath here is where these things has a little clamp that goes right, like a hook that goes and lays right on there and settles in. It's fine of a stand. I think it's nice. You know, as far as coming with the set, as opposed to, you know, you having to buy it separately. But I'm sure there'll be other ones that come out as well. But I don't see a purpose in buying those aftermarket if you already have this one that comes with it. But people have said it does feel a little wobbly. And I mean, mine is not really wobbly like that. Some people said it could fall back easy. It really takes a lot of pressure for you to bring it back, to be honest with you. Like if it's just sitting there and you tap it a little bit, nothing happens. You really would have to really hit it pretty hard for it to fall back. So I don't think there's nothing really worry about with that. As always, you guys, let me know what you guys think. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and I will catch you guys in the next video. So I just want to show something really quick here that I think could be very beneficial. So if you see right there, have something I can point with. You see right here. Let me pull the ramp piece up here so the bar's not in the way. And right here. So right here, that little stud down there. And then that also comes on this side. On this same side up here. You can build a little bracket. And then if you do the same here, that stud right there, that tan stud, and there's one that comes across here. Now I don't know if that's going to get in the way of anything, but I'm going to show you. If you take a 8 stud wide beam, you can mount it across, and even when I pull down this, it hits it, but not much, and you still could see that it opens up here enough that, you know, a figure could still stand there or whatever the case is. So it's not, let me grab Jango real quick. Okay, so he can't stand as well as some would want him to as far as on there. So you lose that ability to have him completely stand. But what you gain is between that bracket and this bracket, you can actually make a platform if you can get a bracket across there. Now, what I realize is that at this stage in the game, I can't put another 8, because that's an 8 stud long. I can't put another 8 stud long going across from that tan piece there to the one across from it. But if you take like a 4 and a 4 piece and then reinforce them by connecting them together with, like, you know, maybe another 4 piece in between them or something of the sort underneath it, you could then form, and then on top of it, you put a platform that joins between this one and that one. So I'm gonna see if that's something that I can pull off. So I just wanna show this really quickly. In case I don't get a chance to kind of further show this later on, and that way I can insert this clip on how I did this. So obviously you guys see this part here. Now, if you look over here, some of that stuff out the way. This right here was the platform piece that goes in this area for the lower seats. I took it apart. Now, just so you understand where I got the pieces from, what I'm going to do is, because that piece came with this platform, that's what that whole seats were built on, this platform. I'm going to take this. Now, I built that across there. I may have shown that in a previous clip, but if I don't upload that clip, I built that across there. So it is a 6 1x6 beam underneath it, a black one, with 2 1x4 beams on top of it. So you have a 6 long with an 8 long on top, and then another 6 long black that you see on top there to reinforce it. So that way it's all sandwiched together. The reason why I did it like that was because if I had just a straight 1x8 long beam, I could put that there. The problem was I can't fit that in that area now after this has been built. Now, if you would have put that beam in there first before building these Technic pieces, then you could have done that. But once you got to this stage, I had to do it like that. And that's the only reason why I tried to fit it in there. I couldn't without taking things apart. It was hard to put it apart. So you can do that however you want. If you got a solid beam, you got to that phase before these Technic beams were put in, then you could do that. But anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this piece here because it sits flush just like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these tile pieces off. Right now I'm having a little bit of trouble getting them off. I'm going to take these smooth tile pieces off. So this can sit flush across and it fits right into that little groove area. I'm going to build it up for that beam to reach the bottom of this so it's supported. And then now you'll have this kind of flat kind of thing going across like that. And it'll be sitting on these studs here. Then I'm going to level these side studs off to equal the same height as that, which comes with the pieces right in here. I could just take these right on the side and do that, level that off on the side. And then I'm just gonna have a flat beam. I'm gonna take some of this out, and then that way it's gonna be a flat area. I'm not gonna use these for seats, or I might put some type of seats in it, but generally what I'm gonna do, and you'll see the finished product if everything goes correct, is just kind of make it an area where I can dress up and use it as an interior area, whether it's for bedding or any other thing I wanna do with it. But I wanna show that now so you know how I got there. So something that I needed to show here, that is that beam that you see right there with a little bit of yellow in it and the black. That's the beam, but that beam is not leveled, so it doesn't connect with the piece above it that I was just showing you up here. That beam, when I elevate it up with a couple of bricks to reach that platform, that gray platform there, and I try to use something to connect them both, they don't connect because it's not leveled. And I don't know how well you can see this, but if you, oh man, that's no good. That's not leveled. Where you see that beam right there with a little bit of the yellow, and then that beige part right there is not leveled, so it doesn't work.